When reading this, you can tell Dan Buckley, CB Cebulski, Kevin Feige, Tom Brevoort, anybody that's upper echelon decision makers at Marvel Comics have no plan. There is no realization on how they can turn this around. They're going to ride it into the iceberg. Marvel President Dan Buckley spoke to ICV2.com about the state of the comic book industry, and I don't believe you can fix anything if you never admit there's actually a problem, which is basically what this entire two-part interview is, Doc.
At some point, I was expecting him to acknowledge the elephant in the room, or the elephants, because there's multiple. All we got was a plethora of corporate speak gobbledygook.
And I think as a leader, you can't enact change, you can't make things better if you've never actually acknowledged that there's a problem. And that's the biggest takeaway from this. It's absolutely mind-blowing what Dan Buckley says here, but there's a lot to get through, so we'll get into the questions and his answers real quick. First question from ICV2.com. What's your evaluation of the state of the comics medium itself? Dan Buckley's answer: it's in flux, but I think it's in a healthy place. Obviously, there's been a lot of change in distribution, specifically in our core comics business. The digital comics business is also going through a bit of flux, but I feel it's in a really good place. The last piece is that there's also a great deal of interest in comics and graphic fiction in the Kickstarter world. It's probably more of a creator-owned talent world than publisher world, but it brings health and vibrancy to the industry. As I said, I think there's a lot of change, but I feel good about the industry.
I don't even think he knows what goddamn year it is half the time, because he's talking about the newsstand distribution system only being a concern 10 years ago. Bitch, it was gone 25 years ago. Either he has incredibly low standards of what is an acceptable and vibrant business, or he's dumb. I mean, one of those things.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy talking about, the industry is in flux, and there certainly are some winners out there, and there's certainly some losers. Right now, Marvel Comics, despite being the direct market leader, which is shrinking right now, is an enormous loser. We've seen their graphic novel sales in comparison to their peers at DC. DC blows them out of the water. In comparison to the mainstream graphic novels, Scholastic blows them out of the water. In comparison to mainstream graphic novels when it comes to manga, blows them out of the water. They're not even in competition with them. The death of comiXology has basically left Marvel and DC with nowhere to put out their digital comic books. Yes, they have their own platforms. They weren't widely accepted. They're not widely used. And the digital market when it comes to superhero comic books shrank.
His answer to the first question in this article was actually very telling to me, because there was one part here when he said there's a lot of change, but he feels good about the industry. There's some habits and new practices we'll need to get to. I don't know exactly what they are, but we're experimenting and playing with different things to take advantage of those change. You are the ostensible leader of Marvel Comics, and you don't even know what the changes are out there.
And claiming that they're new. These aren't new trends. We've been seeing these trends for upwards of 8 years straight now.
Yes.
And he's just now going up like, yeah, we're in a bit of a flux. Things have changed. No, things already changed. And you didn't evolve. You didn't adapt to it. You actually went against your fandom. You drove off your readers. You're left with a dying direct market, unfortunately, which is a byproduct of Marvel Comics leadership under Dan Buckley. And this is what it is. And to bury your head in the sand and pretend none of this is actually happening, that you haven't been left, in the wake of your competition, it's scary.
Yes, it really is. I mean, he's very, very clearly still looking at comics as only competing among other publishers and a little bit with Kickstarter. He's not recognizing the fact that they are now competing for entertainment dollars, a shrinking amount of entertainment dollars in this particular economy, with literally every other form of media.
Next up, they asked him, drilling down a little bit by channel, what are your thoughts on the state of the direct market itself? Dan Buckley: I also feel the direct market is in much better place than most people think it is, but I will admit there's some challenges there as we try to find our way out of the pandemic. We have to find a way to get people in the habit of going to the store more. Let's get Wednesday Warriors back. I do think a lot of these people are still shopping in stores, but they're not browsing as much. What we're hearing is that people aren't coming in every week. They're coming in every 2, 3, 4 weeks, picking up their bundles, and essentially nothing else. We just had the Comics Pro survey to where I think 60% of all comic book retailers in 2023 made less money than they did in 2022. Over 50% made less money than they did in 2019. With the rate of inflation, that is absolutely jaw-dropping, dangerous stuff with this economy. And the direct market itself is shrinking. We're seeing people go out of business day by day. We've had multiple retailers come out, prominent retailers, say, this might not be salvageable. That's what Chuch Rozanski of Mile High said. That's exactly what Phil Boyle of Coliseum Comics said as well. And he's all, no, it's actually pretty healthy. It's better than people think. Even though the people that are in the direct market are saying, oh my goodness, this is on fire.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, first of all, he's still trying to figure out a way out of the pandemic. Guess what? The entire world figured out its way out of that almost 3 years ago at this point. Even restaurants figured that shit out 2 years ago. Yeah, he wants to get the new reader, but he wants the lapsed reader back. He wants the habitual readers back. Guess what? We've been screaming at you for 10 years now what we want out of your product, and you're refusing to fucking give it to us. So guess what? We stopped expecting it. We stopped waiting for it, and we stopped browsing for it.
Well, and there's no really acknowledgement of why did this happen? Did people just get out of the habit? They're like, you know what? Going to my comic book shop and buying the books that I want every Wednesday and maybe finding a few hidden gems on the shelf just doesn't feel right anymore. No, they were driven out of being Wednesday warriors. They wanted to do it. People have been doing this for decades upon decades. The lack of quality from Marvel right now is absolutely jaw-dropping. Amazing Spider-Man, not good. The entire X-Men line, not good. The Avengers haven't been good. Blood Hunt is 60 fucking issues. Is that supposed to get people back every Wednesday? Or is this supposed to turn them away and go, you know what? Every book that I was actually reading, the 3 that I liked, they're tying into this thing that I don't care about.
At no point here is there any sort of acknowledgement that we need to figure out why they stopped. It's just this acceptance that we all spontaneously decided we're not doing the thing that we have habitually done for 30 years for absolutely no reason.
Almost an acceptance of the failure or the state that it was always supposed to be here. There's nothing that we could have done along the way. There's no mistakes that we made that caused this. This is just the way that the market was supposed to happen. And I think once you're a leader, and Dan Buckley is certainly a leader, he's the top guy, Marvel Comics, it's between, Feige, then to Buckley, then right down to like your CB Cebulskis and Tom Revorts. He's at the top of the food chain. This dude has accepted that they can't get better. Once your top tier leadership believe that way, they're in that mindset, there's no turning it around. There's no coming back.
It's almost a self-delusion that because they publish it, it is good. And they do not have any ability to evaluate their product of today versus their product of 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. They have no ability to discern the difference, and they don't discern the difference.
Next up, they said comic sales and graphic novel sales were softer last year. You mentioned some things in your keynote at Comics Pro that you were doing to try and improve the product, specifically the internal process that you're using to try and bring people together for better planning and to make the results more creatively driven. This is what Buckley has to say. We're tapping into the process that worked really well for us pre-pandemic. It's made a big difference because getting the editorial staff physically in the same room makes editors speak to each other. It makes creators talk to each other. It gets people more excited about projects. It's much more helpful with interacting with our marketing team because everyone can feel they're getting face time and they're contributing. I do feel like Blood Hunt is a much stronger presentation than anything we've done in a really long time because people are in the room talking to each other, getting excited, coming up with ideas. The X-Men From the Ashes launch in July is also benefiting from that interaction. Why are we going back to 2019 as some type of a moment of success for Marvel Comics? They had already driven off a large percentage of their readership.
I mean, I feel like there's a little bit of an acknowledgement of the actual realities of the world here. And they're trying to reset to a point of last known, quote unquote, normalcy to them. But it's this weird acceptance that the decline in readership, the overall decline in people giving a shit about the product was just inevitable. They just want to get back to the death spiral that they were on in 2019 rather than the one they're on now, I guess.
They need to be going back to like 2004 or something.
Well, yeah, but the problem is the talent that was in 2004 is already gone. the talent they've brought in is just not even anywhere close to that level of quality. And again, I come back to my point of they've deluded themselves into thinking that Blood Hunt is just as much of a big deal to readers as Civil War was, because they thought about it and because they published it. Their internal validation of an idea therefore validates the idea, not the readership. I don't understand why.
Well, you also had to think about Civil War. You had really good creative on that.
Correct.
You know, and you had a really good creative talent kind of running the show, feeding out the ideas and collaborating. Certainly the writers doing the tie-ins got to do their own thing, but it was with, you know, some oversight and input from Mark Millar himself. Blood Hunt's got Jed MacKay. I don't understand how they can come to the conclusion that a 60-issue event about Marvel fighting vampires is a good presentation, the strongest presentation they've done in years. I will admit the first issue is funnish. You know, it's kind of stupid if you think about it too long.
Yep.
But there's a little bit of fun to be had in there, but it does not feel important.
Because this is a company that actually has convinced themselves that there is no difference in talent between Mark Millar and Jed MacKay or anyone else and anyone else. They believe they're all on the same level. They look at creatives as interchangeable widgets, and they're not. They're better and worse. And they don't want to admit that because it would require them to make an admission that all the superior widgets are long gone and have no interest in working for them.
Speaking of that, great segue, Doc. They asked, the other side of the product area beyond process is talent. Compared to 10 years ago, you're in a much more competitive environment for talent. How does Marvel compete in that environment, and how can you maintain your access to talent? This is what Buckley said. I don't buy your initial theory. I think there's plenty of talent in the industry to tap into. There's cycling of talent always as people age out or move into other mediums, or they're just not as hot as they were 5 years ago. Interacting and recruiting talent obviously got crushed during the pandemic. We are reinvigorating that process, and that's where getting in rooms and talking to each other is incredibly important, because the talent that's coming up and you're talking to, they're in a room, they're talking to people, they're getting a feel for how we operate. Acting as if they've had this really great talent procurement strategy prior to the pandemic shutdown. C.V. Cebulski and Marvel Comics discovered one writing talent in the last decade, Donny Cates, and he kind of flamed out in epic fashion. Other than that, they brought in a ton of hacks, people that did not work out. They signed freaking Tinny Howard to an exclusive. They signed Matthew fucking Borzenberg himself to an exclusive, thinking they were big deals. And guess what? They never turned out. All the talent that could actually move the needle for Marvel Comics are not available to them. They don't pay enough. It's not lucrative enough. It's not an important enough job to be writing Spider-Man anymore or X-Men anymore. People would rather do their own creator-owned projects. They'd rather work, at Hollywood, where they'd rather do anything else than work for Marvel Comics. And him acting like, oh, there's just as much talent today as there always was. There likely is, but they're just not available to Marvel Comics anymore.
He is actually deluded himself into believing that when David Walker and all of the Bendis pals that he marched in there under Axel Alonso are the same as Brian Bendis and back in 2004, Mark Millar, Warren Ellis, Ed
Rick
Brubaker,
Remender, Jonathan Hickman.
Those guys were even the second wave of that.
Mm-hmm.
You had two consecutive waves. Now, granted, the second wave was very much inferior to the first. Every single wave of talent they brought in since has been inferior to the last, with the sole exception of Donny Cates. And I'm pretty sure the only reason that he was even there in the first place is because every other industry saw him for the walking time bomb that he was. So that's the only reason that he was available to the comics industry. Dan Buckley sitting there and either convincing himself or actually believing Celeste Bronfman today is exactly as talented as Ed Brubaker was on Captain America, that first 25 issues. The fact that they hired them justifies their talent level, not the other way around. And the other way around is the way it was, at least in the first few years of Buckley's tenure there, as well as whenever he had, Joe Quesada there. Now, Joe Quesada, for all his faults, was a very, very good talent evaluator. The problem is Dan Buckley isn't. He's a fucking suit. And as a result, he doesn't see where the problems are. He just watches this collapse and thinks that is the inevitable business cycle. And his job is just to, I don't know, stem the bleeding.
And this dude acting like, oh yeah, we've got just as great access to comic book writing talent or writing talent in general as we ever have, is one of the dumbest fucking things I've ever seen in my life. If you've been monitoring comic books, if you're a comic book reader, and even if you weren't paying attention, you've noticed that the quality of writers has degraded to such a degree over the last 15 years that it's unrecognizable. You get no new stories, no new creative, no new ideas anymore. They're just regurgitating and rehashing the better ideas of better writers 20, 30, even 50 years ago at this point. And Buckley knows that they recently tried to hire Brian Michael Bendis back to Marvel Comics to write the X-Men line. Even Brian Michael Bendis, who hasn't had a hit comic book in essentially a decade at this point, said no.
Yes, every single person that they asked that had any sales cachet at all said no. If you are a talented writer and you come to Marvel, not only is your story, whatever story you're working on, going to get interrupted 5 times a fucking year, get dragged into some other stupid event, but in the event that you're actually writing something that's growing and growing and growing interest, you're about to get to the payoff, they're going to take it and turn it into an editorial fucking gangbang at the end, where now you have to coordinate the finale to your event with 43 other writers that are significantly less talented. You got to slow down what you're doing so that they can work it into their publishing schedule and turn it into a 60 issue, 80 issue fucking bukkake of variant cover gimmicks and bullshit to take away any amount of momentum that you're building up. They did it with Venom twice during Donny Cates. For as much as I hate Jason Aaron, he was doing something in that a lot of people that were fans of it really, really enjoyed. And what did they do? They took off the payout for that and turned it into War of the fucking Realms that no one else wanted and that everyone whose shit got interrupted fucking hated. In the event that you actually do something that your core audience, you're growing an audience on and that they really like, they're going to cut your fucking legs out from under you right when you get to the goddamn payoff.
Speaking of your core audience, this is the final question that we'll cover. Over the past decade, Marvel has successfully expanded the demographics of its audience. That's led to an overall growth in opportunity, which almost everybody regards as positive. But there is the thought from some quarters that led to a decline in appeal for the old core audience of teen and young adult males. What are your thoughts on that? This is what Buckley said. I don't think the broadening of our audience had anything to do with if there was some degradation in our appeal with teen and young adult males. If we weren't making the right product to resonate with them out of the core publishing business, that was our content plan, not on the broadening of our content and demographics. Our sales don't indicate that we have a huge problem.
The type of stories you wrote were designed to broaden your demographic. You fucking both sides of your mouth fucking corporate hack. Jesus Christ. This is the biggest load of corporate bullshit I've ever listened to in one fucking interview. I mean, does he actually believe Heidi McDonald's theory that a bunch of 40-something-year-olds that were lifelong comic readers just fucking drop dead? Does he actually believe we're dead? And that's the reason why we're not buying his product anymore. We all just spontaneously decided, not only are we going to not buy new comic books, not go into the store, we're just going to stop habits for absolutely no reason. And your content plan was the core part of your demographic program. You fucking liar.
And the stupidity in all of this, to say that Marvel has very successfully expanded the demographics of its audience. So they've expanded the demographics, they've changed a little bit, but you haven't very successfully done anything if you actually declined your entire fucking sales.
Exactly.
That's not successful. That's failure.
Yes, it is the exact antithesis of success, you dumb bastard. Look, yes, you expanded your demographic, you evened it out and blah, blah, blah. And it more matches the demographics
There's
of
more
the country.
equity, Doc.
There's more equity. But guess what? You didn't grow them. You just shrank your primary audience.
You did it at the expense of your actual audience that had stayed the course for decades and been through the Clone Saga in one more day and still stayed on board. You actually managed to piss those people off to such a degree that they decided you weren't worth it anymore.
If you were 90-10 male to female before, you're now 50-50. The only problem is you added 2% to the women and lost 70% of the fucking men. Congratulations. I don't know what this guy thinks success is.
Nobody expects Dan Buckley to go out to ICV2.com or Comics Pro or anywhere and just be like, yep, Marvel Comics is dead. There's no hope for the future. We did all of this stuff. No one expects you to just, fall in the sword or anything like that. But you would like a tiny ounce of humility to be honest with yourselves, your customers, the people that you're talking to, and owning up that there are very, very real problems, that things have not gone smoothly the last decade, but that you could reassure them that you have a plan. When reading this, you can tell Dan Buckley, CB Cebulski, Kevin Feige, Tom Brevoort, anybody that's upper echelon decision makers at Marvel Comics have no plan. There is no realization on how they can turn this around. They're going to ride it into the iceberg.
This whole entire article was about, we've done nothing wrong and we're going to stay the course because we believe in it. There's a couple of minor ideas here about some stupid bundling, and that he's on board with all the comic book metadata. He's one of these people that has convinced himself that somehow knowing sales numbers and having them reportable in a easily categorized fucking spreadsheet is going to change and save the comic book industry.
He knows his sales numbers.
He knows them. Yes, exactly. He doesn't
make them reportable. He's the fucking president.
That is his fucking job. He knows what his sales numbers are. He doesn't need Comics Pro to design a new metadata system so that he knows them. Guess what? He just calls the fucking accounting department and said, how many did we print? How many did we ship? That's it. What? He wants to know DCs? Fine. Guess what? He doesn't even need to do that.
Call your peer over at DC. I'm sure there's lateral communication there. And hey, if they want to do an information sharing program, you could work that out.
Absolutely. And I guarantee over at every single BarCon, they've already had these fucking conversations. Reporting numbers doesn't help anything.
But he could literally, because he's the president of Marvel, go to their PR department and say, hey, I want you to release our sales data for the previous month. And they would have to do it because he's the fucking boss.
It's beating around every single nonsensical excuse for why the comics industry is in the shape it's in. All the bullshit excuse making from Heidi McDonald and Rich Johnston, Graham McMillan, and every other no-name, Rob Sokowitz, and every other clown that pretends to be a comic book journalist just carries fucking water for their propaganda department. I won't even call it a PR department. The publishers are now acting as a mouthpiece just for their fucking echo chamber with their propaganda arm in the fake comics media.
It was crazy. I never expected that interview to be quite so stupid, but that's where we are in 2024. If you enjoyed this conversation and you like a little bit more of this, Doc and I literally talked for almost 40 minutes on this. Obviously on YouTube, it'll be under 20 minutes likely. If you want all of it, you got to go to the Doc Unfiltered podcast on Patreon. There's a link in the video description. Not only will you get that, but you also get the Doc Q&A, as well as the Hot or Not show with Jim, and you get all the audio files for all the videos as well. So if you haven't checked it out, that is the place to be for your real geek news.